Welcome back to Fixing Furniture. This is the second part of a two-part series about how to deal with split wood and repair it. In a previous episode, I worked through the storage chest where the top had split off, so that's now repaired. The second part is this table here. It's a pre-confederation table, so it's very old. It's been repaired a few times, and you can see it's got a split top. So I'm going to walk you through how to diagnose the issues, how to repair it so it won't break again. In addition, there's a drawer here that's not running properly, it's missing a part, so we'll get to that as well. Stick with me, I'll show you how it's done.
As a furniture repair business, we're opening the doors to our workshop to show you the tools and techniques to repair furniture.
The front rail here, you can see this has been broken off.
We give you tips to make your repair projects easier. Let's get into the workshop and start fixing furniture.
Sponsored by Kennedy Hardware, offering restoration hardware for antique furniture. There are a few things that I do every time a new piece of furniture comes into my workshop. The first one is look at the problems in the piece and understand the root cause of the problems so that I can repair them in a way that they won't reoccur. The second thing is looking at the age of the piece. I want to make sure I'm respectful of the furniture. Now, the customer provided us some details when she dropped this off. She said that her father said this was built around 1815 or 1820. So it's a very old table in terms of Canadian history. Canada as a country, we had Confederation in 1867. So this is what's called a pre-confederation table. Now, there's a number of things that are going on with this. This is on a slope, so the legs aren't all the same length. We've got a problem with the drawer here. One of the drawer slides is missing, and the tabletop here has broken. So as I take this apart, we're probably going to find a few more problems. But the first thing I notice is the top of the table has pegs through it. And these pegs are preventing the wood from expanding and contracting. So you can see there's an opening here. This board has come loose. There's a long crack right here. What happens is wood wants to expand and contract across the grain. It doesn't move this way along the grain, it's across the grain. So when it's humid out, the wood absorbs moisture and expands. And when it's dry out, like in the wintertime when we heat our homes, the wood will contract. So all this expansion and contraction has broken this apart. These pegs should not be in here. This isn't the way you build tabletops. So we'll have to go through and fix the problems here. Let's look at the drawer. There's a simple pull on the front of the drawer, but if I twist it here, you can see how much this moves. So there's a drawer support that's missing. So here, there's one missing, there's one here. So I'll need to reproduce that. Also, there are some nails in the dovetails on this drawer. So if I can take this drawer apart, I'll take those out because they should not be there. It should be glued properly. And then there's also a split in the drawer bottom here, and these joints here, let me put this on the bench and I'll show you what this is. The drawer bottom is made of 3 separate boards, and you can see there's a bit of a gap here between this one. This board is split, so I'll have to fix that. But because this is a dovetail box front and back, these boards have to be contained within the 4 sides. So by having tongue and groove joints between these will slide back and forth and allow for wood movement. But sometimes people will glue these together or they'll nail them in place to prevent that wood from moving. So once I get this glued in place, I'll just shuffle them a little bit so there's less of a gap, but that has a purpose in there that wood can move and it won't break open the drawer. One of the things I really like about this is the joinery. So you can see there's 2 pins here and here. So this board here is a tenon that comes in here, and there are 2 pins that hold that board from coming back out again. I'm a little bit puzzled as to why there's one here and here when there's no tenon. Over here, if we take a look, you can see there's the pin from the other side. So you can actually tap that out to take the joint apart. For some reason, there's a tenon here that's been cut off. I don't know whether that was just plugged in there from the original craftsman or if someone's modified this. But these pegs here are likely where someone got the idea to put pegs in the top here to hold the top on. Now it's kind of hard to see here, but I'll see if I can hold this up so you can see the table is sloping to the left. And if we look down at the legs, they're fairly worn. So it looks like there might have been some water damage at some point. So before I'm done here, I'll have to make sure I go across all 4 here and make sure the legs are the same length so we can get this table level. Now that I understand the table in more detail, the first thing I want to focus on is gluing up boards that need gluing, because it can take up to 24 hours to come to full strength on that glue joint. So I'm going to pop the top off here, I'm going to take the drawer apart, and I can glue up those broken boards. So here you can see the pegs that are on the underside of the table. Now what I would have expected is to see some sort of fastener along here, but I'm not seeing one. So I'm wondering if these pegs are original. Now I do notice that there are two center pegs here and here, and then the outer pegs are on the legs themselves. And I'm wondering if someone was relying on that little bit of movement in that joint so these wouldn't break, but that obviously hasn't worked. So to solve the problem, what I want to do is close up this gap, repair the part that's broken off at the back. So I'll keep these pegs on the top as decoration. I'll keep these two here functional in terms of holding the top on, but I'm going to use some modern technology to attach these from the bottom that will allow for that wood movement so this top won't come apart again. One of the challenges I struggle with in working in antiques is, do I preserve something 100% knowing it's going to fail in the future? Or do I make that slight modification so it'll last for a couple more centuries? I'd love to hear what your thoughts are. Add a comment to the video. Because I've got pegs in the bottom of the table here, I'm just going to set this on the drawer and we'll see how this break comes together here. So the profiles look like they're matching. It's rocking a little bit right here, but there is some glue residue. So what I'll do is clean that glue residue out. It looks like we might have a good fit here to be able to glue this back together again. I'll also separate this joint here. This is a tongue and groove. I'll clean out this and see how tight I can get those boards back together again. As I showed in the previous video, if you're looking at glue and it's crunchy, it's typically hide glue. Now, if you want to clean off hide glue, what you can do is put some vinegar on it, let it sit for a minute, and that acid breaks down the protein in the glue and makes it easier to come off. Some people use heat for this. I prefer not to, because heat can damage the finish, and if you get really carried away, it can damage the wood. Okay, with everything cleaned off, let's see how these parts fit together. Well, that's much better than it was before. It's not a perfect seam, but you can also tell in the end it's a tongue and groove joint. So I'm happy with that. Now back here, yeah, not bad. There's a bit of a splinter missing right here, but the rest of it, that's going to glue up well. So what I'm going to do is use hide glue on this. Because there's some residue of hide glue here, I can't get it off 100%. What I'm going to do is use hide glue, because the hide glue can reactivate the old hide glue, so all of that will stick together. If I were to put PVA glue on here, carpenter's glue, yellow glue, it wouldn't hold. It just doesn't have enough to grip to, and those wood fibers wouldn't bond. So hide glue is the right tool for both these joints here. There's also a split down here that's on an angle that I want to open up so I can get some glue in it. So what I'll do is put a block here, another one here. What I want to do is lever that open. So this will just stabilize the block on the top here. Now I should be able to put this on and separate the parts very gently. I need to get glue across that whole crack, so the technique I use is using dental floss. What I'll do is put some glue on top of the crack here, and then I'll use dental floss to pull that through. So I'll take a piece here, start it on the top, and then as I drag the dental floss down, it pulls the glue from the surface down into that crack. It's really important to make sure you get glue across that whole crack, otherwise it won't have the holding power to keep this together. It does take a while to sort of work it in back and forth, but it's worth the effort to make sure this is something that's going to hold. You can see down here where that glue is coming out. I've wiped up the excess glue here, and then I'll release the clamp. And then once I clamp this together, we should have some glue squeeze out. So I'll put glue on the other parts, and we'll get this all put together. I've got some clamping coils here that have some clear packing tape on them. That way the glue won't stick to them. So I'm going to move this over from the drawer to these coils to glue this up. Okay, I'm going to put a little bit more glue on the back, the underside of this, because I don't mind if there's glue squeeze out here. I don't want a ton on the top. And then I can put this together, but before I do, I want glue on this edge. So you want to put glue on both sides of the joint, that way if there's a slight miss putting glue on one side, you're guaranteed to get it on the other. Okay, so this is together now. Okay, and then the last part is here. And then I can clamp it up to make sure that all the parts are properly aligned. And we've got clamping pressure for the glue to do its job. I've got clamping blocks here that allow me to leave a space where the crack is. And what this does is it keeps the two pieces perfectly aligned. So I put this on, and that way when I've got a break that's on an angle, it won't slide around on me. And we'll keep it exactly flat. So I've got one more for the front here, and I can put the clamping on front to back. So I can now put the clamps on. And sometimes people ask, how many clamps do you need to put on a piece? Well, clamping force works on a 45-degree angle from the clamp. So this clamp here will be coming across and covering this half of the table. This clamp will come across on a 45-degree angle, and it will cover off this portion. So this line is fine, but I'm lacking clamping pressure right in the center here. So I need to put a clamp on and probably a weight just to keep that down, because that break is on an angle. So this piece of wood here will want to pull up. So I'll weigh that down, put another clamp on, and we're good to go. So I just use cinder blocks for weights. Put on the last clamp here. And then I can move on to taking this drawer apart. Well, this isn't quite clamped up the way I want. It's level here and here, but here this backboard is raised a bit. So I'll have to pull up my deep reach clamp, put a clamp on here with blocks that'll keep it flat, and then I can get it clamped up. So to make this easier, what I'm going to do is tape my clamping block underneath so it doesn't move around on me. So I'm putting on right where the seam is here, so I can get that properly lined up without much hassle. There, that's what I like. I'll just clean up the glue squeeze out while the glue is wet, just makes it easier. Now because I've got all the clamps on one side, it can cup a tabletop like this. You see there's a bit of movement there. So I'll just move this to the side here, put a couple of weights on it, and that will keep it flat on top of those clamping cauls that I've got underneath. On the drawer, I'd like to get these nails out of the dovetail if possible. They might have been put in there to hold things together. So let's just see if I can get a spreader clamp in here and pull this apart. Oh, no, that's not moving. So someone likely used PVA glue in here and then nailed it. So that's permanently glued. So plan B will be gluing up the split and then clamping it inside. Now, fortunately, if I slide all of these down, there's a slight gap in here. So what I can do is I can put a wedge in here to provide clamping force this way once I put some glue in that break, and then we'll get this back together again. I'm going to glue this up from the underside here, and I've got wedges all set aside. I've got my glue ready here, so I'm using a PVA glue here because I want a permanent bond. This is not a furniture joint, so it doesn't need to come apart in the future. So we'll just make sure that there's enough glue in there that this won't be coming apart once this is cured. So I'm just putting the wedges in from either side, and what that's doing is putting pressure on the joint here, and that's come together pretty well here. Looks like there's a bit of a splinter missing right there, but I'll set this aside, then we can work on the drawer support. So from this angle you can see here we've got a drawer support and we're missing one on this side. Now I don't think this drawer is original. So you can see here, as I mentioned before, there's a pin mortise and tenon, and there's a mortise here. I suspect somebody took this rail, cut it down, and used this section up here for the drawer. Typically in drawer construction, you'd have a rail here, and you'd have one at the top as well. Let me show you in some historic pictures of tables like this, what I mean by that. If you look at a table like this, you can see we've got a rail here and here. And some of these it's difficult to see. There is one up here. This one is very similar to the table that we have. This one is referred to as a work table from York County, made the second quarter of the 19th century. Now if I go to another page, you can see this is a really good example. Here we've got one rail at the bottom, one rail at the top. So it's really lending to the idea that this drawer is not original. So what I need to produce is one piece here that provides the lower support, and then there's a piece on the side here that prevents the drawer from wanting to move back and forth. So it's fairly straightforward woodworking to do that. There's one nail here, there's one nail at the very end. We'll nail it in place, get it all fit once that drawer is dried, and this will be back in working order. So I'm going to grab some wood from my short wood pile, and you can see here I've got some broken furniture parts that I can reuse. I label the wood at the end, so here you can see this is red oak, it's 29 inches long. Here maple is 26. It makes it easier to find wood when I'm looking through the wood pile. I recently did a project with pine, and that's what I'm looking for, so I'll grab one of these. I'm going to take the square block and I'm going to cut a section out here. So on the table saw I have to remove my blade guard because the blade will only be coming part way in. So I've got to be careful with this cut. On newer table saws, you'll see something at the back of the blade called a riving knife. And what that does is it prevents the wood from drifting into the blade here. The blade spins this way, and that would kick the wood up at the operator. So that'll give you a kickback. But with a riving knife, it prevents that from happening. So it's a good safety device. If you're working on an older table saw, it might be worth upgrading just for the safety device. I'll set the blade to the depth that I want to cut to, and then what I'll do is move the fence over to 3/4 of an inch. I'll turn on the dust collector and we'll get going. So now we've got this L shape here we're looking for. I'll cut this to length on the miter saw and we'll do the rest of the joinery by hand. If you don't have a lot of machines in your shop, you can do this by hand, but what I'd recommend instead of cutting something out is doing this with 2 pieces of wood. Have one for the base, one for the side, glue it together. This is a process called additive woodworking instead of what I've just done, and that's subtractive woodworking. So now I've got a little bit of joinery to cut here by hand. I'll show you what I mean by that. So here's the drawer support. So the drawer will run on this, but this needs to be set back here. So I need to cut that block out so that this is flush here. So I'll mark that out, cut it with a handsaw. Now if you're new to the world of tools, there are 2 different types of handsaws you can use. One is a Western saw, and that cuts on the push. The blade is thicker and has to be more rigid. But Japanese saws cut on the pull, and that's what I prefer and I'd recommend. Because the blades are thinner, that means that you're going through much less wood and they cut much faster. So if you're choosing one, I've got 2 that I use here frequently, plus a flush cut saw. I'll leave a link in the video description. When cutting things, it's best to have a stabilized work surface. So I'm going to cut this, and with a Japanese saw you want to start away from you and start the cut here and then pull this way because you're pulling on the cut and the material here is supported, so it's less likely to splinter on you. So just guide it with my thumb, get it started, and then I can cut it. There's my cut. Let's go this direction. There we go. Okay, let's see how it fits. It's a little snug, which is good. Now, there's a nail in this end that I need to take out. So I think what I'm going to do is wait till the glue's dried on the drawer. I'll set the drawer in, align this the way I want it, and then I'll nail it in. Normally I'd screw something like this in, but because there are pins from the joinery in here, there's very little real estate to be able to put a screw in. So I think the nail is the right hardware for this job. The glue is now fully cured on the tabletop and the drawer, so that means it's come to full strength. I'm ready to assemble the table, but before I do that, I want to tell you about our Fixing Furniture membership community. This is an area where you can chat with others about furniture repair and restoration. We've also got some reference sheets that you can download. You get to watch all of our videos without any commercials, and you also get to see our videos before they get published on YouTube. You can find out more about that on fixingfurniture.com. Now I'm going to be introducing a new piece of technology in furniture that's going to prevent this top from splitting again. This is a figure 8 clip. This will allow for wood movement when I attach the top, but before I get to that, let's work on the drawer and get it installed. As I showed you before, this is going in here, and what I want to do is raise it up just a little bit above the front rail here. Now on the left side here, there's a lot of wear on this rail, and that's because the drawer has worn down the support here, and it's now interfering with it. So what I'm going to do is raise that up a little bit. Let me show you in detail. So up close you can see some of the wear marks here, and it's because this rail is flush here. But if I add a piece of veneer to the top of this, I now have a support that's higher than that front rail, and this is what the drawer will ride on. When you're adding veneer to drawer supports, you need to make sure you clean them off well, because there's likely wax on them, and we want the glue to stick to the bare wood. So we'll just give it a good scrub, dry it off, give it a light sanding, and then we can cut a piece of veneer to fit this, and then I'll fit the other side before gluing it on. So I'll put the veneer here so I can test fit how this drawer is going to work here. This slide is nice and snug, so it needs to be sitting up a little bit here, a little bit proud. And because these two corners here are fixed and this one's fixed, this one back here is what I need to adjust up or down. So I'm going to put the drawer in, we'll slide it in place, and then I could mark the location. That looks like about it there. I'll just hold it and try the drawer. Yep, that's it. So let's see how this works. I'll put the veneer here, put the drawer in, and there we go. Okay, so I'll glue the veneer down and then we'll work on the top and put in these figure 8 clips. So I'll glue the veneer down here with hide glue, clamp it with a clamping caul, and then we're good to go. To attach the table, I'll just rotate this and we can look at this in detail on the front. So the clip is going to go here. This spot here and this spot here is where the original pegs are. So I'm going to leave those in place. So I need to put a clip here and here, and it's as simple as using a Forstner bit with the right measurement. I've got my marking gauge set to 1/4 of an inch, so I'll just mark it here. This is where the center of the Forstner bit is going to be focused on. So I'll just line it up and drill. And now we have a location that I can screw this in, and it will freely rotate back and forth here and allow for wood movement. So I just need to drill a pilot hole for the screw. And I'm using a number 6 screw to attach this into the countersunk hole. Now when you tighten these down, you don't want to tighten them all the way. You want a little bit of freedom so that they can swivel back and forth. So if I tighten it there, it's too tight. Back it off just a little bit more, and there we go. I've got 3 more of these to add, but I also need to cut off the pegs here, so I'll cut this off, install this on the top, so at least it's still decorative. If you're looking for a great quality flush cut saw, I recommend Gokujo. I'll leave a link in the video description. The next step would normally be to put the top on and then pre-drill and put the screws in, but unfortunately I've got these drawer supports here that are in the way. So I've got to reclamp this to get that out of the way, then I need to dry fit it, mark the holes, bring it off, drill the holes, put it back on again. So a little bit more work here, but it'll be pretty quick. I'll now drill the pilot holes, but to prevent drilling through the material, what I'll do is put something on called a tape flag. This is a common woodworking technique where you take the drill bit and the screw and you put a piece of tape to act as your depth gauge. So this tape will spin around and will tell me when I need to stop drilling so I don't go right through the surface here. I'm now going to put some hide glue where these 2 pegs are going, and then I can put the top on. I'll put some glue on the pegs as well, and that way we've got good glue coverage. And then I can set this on top and secure it to the table. I'm using a Robertson screwdriver with a square drive, so this is easy to get in there. But if you're dealing with a Phillips, for example, you can take a magnet and stick it near the end of your screwdriver, and that will keep the screw on and keep it secured. I'll now glue in these pegs just so that we don't have holes in the top and it preserves the look of the table. And then what we'll do is level up the legs. And So this table has a slope on it, and my bench is perfectly level, but if I get this level in the center, I've got almost a 1/4 inch gap here versus here. So here, it's also touching the line on one side, and if I lift it up, it's not quite a 1/4 inch. So what it's telling me is this corner over here is high, this corner over here is low. If I cut the leg on the high side, this table will wobble because these two legs are longer. So I actually have to take a bit off that leg, and this leg, so that this table will sit level. I'll do some marking and get cutting. The best way for me to deal with this is to use the tabletop that's now secured as my point of reference for the length of each of these legs. Tape measures can be kind of cumbersome for something like this, so I just got a scrap piece of pine here. This is the shortest leg. I'm just going to put a mark on it here, and then what I can do is I can transfer that mark over to these other legs. So you can see the mark here. I've got to take off a little bit, but if we bring it to the front here, let me just refocus the camera. I have to take off a lot more on this front corner. So this is something that's typically called a story stick. It's a useful tool in the workshop. Another useful tool is a white pencil. It's really good for marking dark pieces of wood. So I need to draw some reference lines here for cutting, but this is a tapered leg. So what I want to do is work on the square side. So the inside of these are square, the outsides are tapered. It's quite an uncommon design. I haven't seen that before. So this now has a straight line, but if I were to go off of the front reference, which is the outside of the leg, this would be on an angle. So I need to go from the inside of the leg, which is square, to get my line. Now I've got a line to cut to. So now I'll reposition the table so I can cut the legs. I'll let the table top overhang the side of the workbench. Make sure the leg is supported, and now I can cut this. Now, if I did this right, it should be level, but it's likely going to have a wobble to it. So let's see. Yeah, it does have a wobble, but let's check the level. So here it's touching the line, but if I wobble it to the right, it's centered. So it's looking good if we push it that way. On this angle here, let's see. Yep, if I push it that way, it works as well. So when I wobble the table, you see how this moves up? That's the amount I need to take off of this leg over here. Okay, let's give it a try. Haha, no wobble. And we're level. So the last thing to do now is put a couple coats of shellac on the runners to seal them, and then put some candle wax on them so that this drawer will be freely running. Once I've done that, I'll bring you back and we'll take a look at the final project. This table is now ready to go back to the customer. I hope you've enjoyed this two-part series on how to deal with split wood, learning about the different types of adhesives and when to use them, as well as different clamping techniques to repair and restore furniture like this. The next project I've got on the go is a steamer trunk. We'll show that to you. It's got a lot of work that's coming ahead. If you haven't subscribed yet, subscribe and turn on the bell notification, and that way you'll get notified every time we publish a video. Thanks for watching Fixing Furniture.